All right, this is one of the most talked about books right now. Jesus and John Wayne, published in 2020. Is the hype real? Well, let's take a look. Welcome to Books and Big Ideas, what I'm reading, what I'm thinking about, with Joel Wentz. All right, so I'm going to get into my normal review format here, which is the main idea, the research, the readability, and then the reasonableness of the book. But before that, just a really quick introductory word because, and I'm going to sound totally like a hipster right now, but I read this book before it was cool. I read this in 2020, shortly after it came out, and I actually wrote a written review of it for the Englewood Review of Books, which I'm a contributing editor for. And the reason I say this is because this book has kind of blown up. It's gotten really huge. But my reaction to it is and was just to the book. When I read it, there was no hype around it. I had not heard of the author, Kristin before. I purely reacted to the content of the book. And I'll link my written review. My written review was published in 2020. So my reaction personally preceded the traction and the notoriety that the book has gotten. So just know that going into this, I'm going to recount my opinion of the book based on the book itself, not filtered through the hype. And the reason I'm putting this out now is because the book has gotten a lot of conversation and attention, but also because the paperback is about to come out, I believe in June. It's April as I record this. So this might be a really good chance for people to grab a book if it's something of interest to them. And so hopefully my thoughts will help you sort out whether or not it's something you should read. All right, that all being said, real quick, the main idea here is it's a provocative thesis. It's a provocative idea, but the writer, Kristin Dumais, she's an historian at Calvin College. Her main contention in this book is that Donald Trump, the election of Donald Trump in 2016, a lot of people were confused because here's this immoral, coarse-talking, just a rude, arrogant guy who seemingly betrays all of the family values and moral values of the white evangelical voting bloc that rallied around him. And her contention, there's a lot of confusion as to how those things lined up. Her contention is that his macho, machismo, militant, overly masculine, bravado way of being is not a betrayal of some of the most deeply held cultural values of white evangelical American culture, but is actually in line with them. Like that he actually represents some of the values, the ways that white evangelicals have idolized a brand of individualistic, rugged, militant masculinity for decades. So her contention, it's provocative, but her contention is that it actually on some level shouldn't have surprised any of us. So that's her thesis. Like I said, it's provocative, it's interesting, and it's probably part of a major reason why it sparked so much reaction. All right, but now let's break it down a little bit, just in a few minutes. The research, not much to say here because she is an academic historian. She's done her homework. This is a narrative history, so she tracks through multiple decades, really getting steam kind of World War II-ish up through today, but there's some antecedents before that as well in the early 1900s. But in a narrative historical sense, she pulls on a lot of news events, so news articles, interviews with people in the stories and the events that take place. But also she synthesizes some serious academic historical work from people like George Marsden and Darren Dochuk and like real people who've really proven their historical mettle in that sense. So it's good. It's also, which I appreciated, very clearly footnoted, so you can chase down some of the sources, which I've done. I've actually gone on to read people like Darren Dochuk because of this book, in part. So it's very easy to track down stuff if something compels you or intrigues you and you want to learn more. So well done on the research. There's nothing really to note more there, other than it's historical research and it's not. And cultural, it's not really theological or philosophical, which I'm going to say more about that at the end. In terms of readability, this is probably the highest marks the book would get in terms of my categories. It's extremely readable. I found it actually just engrossing, like compelling page turning, which is rare for more academic historical work. Now, it doesn't read academic. It doesn't read like a journal. It doesn't read like anything that way. And she shows just her skill her skill with language and words, in that it makes it super accessible and like honestly engrossing. Like I was really pulled into the historical story that unfolds on the pages. She makes great connections between events. You kind of get this sense of the cultural tides as they shift and as cultural decades respond to things that had happened in previous decades. And she draws the theme of masculinity and a certain brand of kind of individualistic, militant, conflict-oriented masculinity. She draws that to the surface, and you see it weaved in and through these events and this narrative in it's really, really readable. It's honestly enjoyable to read, even though it's kind of unsettling in the other way because it's somewhat disturbing too. But man, super readable, highest marks for me in that. Loved the experience of reading this book. Finally, is it reasonable? This is the thing people want to know. Is it a reasonable argument? And really quickly, two things to say first about this. Two things that a book like this is not. A book like this is not a causal argument. It doesn't get into the philosophy and theology. So the question of what is driving this cultural value, is it the theology in evangelicalism? Is it something else? Like what's creating the value and really driving it forward? That's not so much in this book. That's not what she's trying to say. That's not what she's trying to argue. So it's not there. It's also not a silver bullet magical explanation of everything in culture. It's not the one key explanation for why Donald Trump got elected, I don't think. But I also don't think she's trying to make that case. So don't read it looking for that causal explanation or the silver bullet magical unlock the mysteries of American culture explanation. It's not those things, and no single book is either of those things, really. But that being said, what it is an examination of a cultural theme, a theme of cultural values that shows up in an aspect of American religious culture, namely white evangelicalism, that points to patterns and exposes the ways this cultural value shows up in a series of decades. And as an examination, as an exposure of that theme, and as she makes the case that that theme is present and that theme has some role to play, maybe a major role to play in the state of evangelical culture in the election of Donald Trump, particularly almost as a symbolic kind of event. As an examination of that and as a story about that, it's a resounding success. I think it's really, really superb in that way, in that sense. If you read it in the sense that the case that she is trying to put forward, it's extremely successful. It is like, and I've heard other people use this, but this is the experience I had. I'm someone who grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s. I imbibed John Eldredge Wild at Heart when I was in high school. My dad and men in my church went to Promise Keepers. I mean, I was immersed in a lot of this stuff. Oliver North, there's a chapter on him in here, which I thought was really good. Reading this book can be like the impact of when you are looking at an optical illusion and you don't get it, and then something clicks and you see the optical illusion for what it is. Reading this book is like that. She reveals something powerful about white evangelical culture, this trend, this value that's deeply in the culture. And once you see it, once you see the optical illusion for what it is, you can't go back to not seeing it. Like it's that powerful of an explanatory kind of book. And so she's given something powerful to our culture, and it's a reason it's gotten so much traction. And I think it's well deserved. And I think it will hopefully push forward further conversations that need to happen, of things that she doesn't get into and things that the book itself can't address because of the scope of it, namely the causal stuff and the other things I was talking about. So hopefully this helps you get a sense of what Jesus and John Wayne is. I loved the book. I raved about it in my written review. I'm going to be rereading it in the future and would highly recommend it if any of this sounds of interest to you. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you for my next review.